Hey everybody, welcome back. I am your host, Joe Foster, and otherwise known as the Black Person 13. And today we are going to be discussing the airplane movie franchise. And even though there's only two movies, I still consider it to be a franchise because of how good it was, at least for the first one. Second one we'll get into when I get into that. But again, I'd like to go ahead and say it now and just get it out of the way. Feel free to leave your comments after you watch this, telling me what you think of it and any of my other videos, and what you would like for me to do for upcoming videos. Because I do listen, and I do read them and see what they say and take them into account. If I can do it, I will. So, anyways, now on to our movies. First up is the 1980 one, the original Airplane. Which this one, oddly enough, has come under debate for years, and as being a parody of the 1950s movie Zero Hour. And supposedly, this is the reason why there is a note in the credits to the director of Zero Hour, is because of them being so much alike that they got the rights to it and made a parody in this way. While others just claim that this is a separate film thing altogether and they just happen to be similar in the idea of which they took place. The film came out in Airplane came out in 1980. The cast included Robert Hayes as Ted Stryker, a former pilot who has had PTSD since the war. Um, The actor was in the movies 1979's Fall of House of Usher. He's had minor roles until the 90s, from which 1994 to 1996, there was an animated Iron Man series in which he played Iron Man, and then the superhero movie, as one of the more recent ones that you would probably know him from as Blaine Riker. Actress Julie Haggerty as Elaine Dickerson. Oddly enough, I couldn't find anything before this movie as her earliest acting credit. That maybe they just don't have it anywhere, or that this may actually have been her first film role, her first role in general. But after this, a lot of the stuff she did was minor roles until the late 90s. But where most people would remember her from is Family Guy, as Lois's sister Carol, who married the mayor, Adam West. Or more recently, a show called Black Monday as Jackie Georgina. And also, and for the third character that's important to this, is Leslie Nielsen as Dr. Rumack. Where most people remember, where a lot of people that are from the 70s and 80s would remember him from is Police Squad and the Naked Gun franchise. The Naked Gun, it actually came from the Police Squad if you watch the credits for it. Scary Movie, where he played the character Detective Frank Drebin. He also did a movie called Spy Hard, where he played a spy, very Agent WD-40. I'm not. That was a good one for a parody on spy movies. He was in Scary Movies 3 and 4 as the president, and Superhero Movie as Uncle Albert, and Stan Helsing as Kay the waitress, which was an interesting twist to see, but actually pretty funny still. Um, okay, Now, for possible spoiler alert to this, so you may want to skip ahead a little bit, just letting you know. The plot to this movie is that Ted Stryker, a former pilot who just got released from the hospital for PTSD, steps onto a plane hoping to get this girl he met back that he fell in love with during the war. During the course of the flight, though, a lot of people come down with food poisoning, and he ends up being the only hope. And he hasn't flown since the war because of how it affected him. And now he's the only hope for these people to survive. And now some interesting facts that I found on multiple sites, such as mentalfloss.com and IMDb, as well as one or two other places. The argument between the white and red zone at the airport in the beginning of the film was the directors actually hired real people working at the Los Angeles airport to do that scene. And those two are actually a couple in real life. Lloyd Bridges, Peter Graves, and Leslie Nielsen were all chosen for their roles in this film because of the no-nonsense characters they were known to portray previously, and that by doing so, their portrayal would give, in the director's minds, the line delivery in the satire film, such as this one, it would give it a more comical touch. Lloyd Bridges was actually reluctant to do this movie initially because he didn't think he'd have the ability to do it, in terms of it being a comedy rather than what he was used to doing. In 2005, on an episode of The Today Show, professional basketball player, ex-professional basketball player and NBA legend Kareem Abdul-Jabbar told of how on a European flight, he was asked to sit in the cockpit in an empty seat so that they could say they flew with Roger Murdoch, the character he plays in this film. Something I didn't remember that actually caught my attention. This was actually Leslie Nielsen's first comedic part. Now, I thought he had like minor bit in a show where he had a line or two that was funny. Turns out he didn't. At the time that this movie was done, he feared he was getting too old for stage, and that the only roles he was going to be given after this was the elderly grandfather roles. But he got to take this role, and it opened up new options for him, and he became the comedic legend that we all know. The studio, however, originally wanted Dom DeLuise, who most people would probably remember as Itchy in All Dogs Go to Heaven. But some may remember him for Victor Prenzim in Cannonball Run, or as the cat Tiger in the American Tail franchise. Anyways, the studio wanted him to do it, but the directors went out, and Leslie Nielsen got the role instead. The directors also got into a fight with the Directors Guild initially because they wanted to have it where all three of them got credit as directors, and the Directors Guild was not willing to let them have it. But again, they got lucky and ended up winning out on this. And the first 2 days of the film's gross covered the entire production budget that the film had, which to me is impressive because that tells you how great of a movie it was. or how big the expectations were for it. Because there are some of those where they can cover the budget and then they end up being a major flop in that process. Now, the directing trio, though, actually declined to do a sequel as they felt they'd exhausted all airport gags that could be done. Also, there was an actress in this movie. I didn't realize who she was, but it's a character known as Ethel. It's a person known as Ethel Merman, who was known as the undisputed first lady of musical comedy stage. This was the final form. In the film, she plays a soldier who believes they're Ethel Merman. But this was the final film Ethel Merman would do before her death in 1984. Also, the the movie features a dance scene where the Bee Gees' "Staying Alive" song is played. Well, during a part of it, they actually had to speed it up. But because they did that, they actually had to go and get permission from the Bee Gees in order to speed up the music in the film. And yet, the Bee Gees hate that song. They didn't want to do it in the first place, and they refused to perform it in concerts. So it sounds kind of like a cheap deal to me. My final notes on Airplane 1 are it's a great film for the family, and the jokes are there for the kids and adults alike, more for the adults, given its rating. And it's a nice way to go about things. And it's not too serious, but for a parody done at its time, I think it still holds up even today. Though some of the stuff may go overboard. Also, I can see in this film why some of the other countries have issues with the U.S. and how we view things. Even though it's a parody, so we're making fun of everything. Some things in it can be seen as going too far. My overall grade for the first one, I give it an A minus. Personally, I think the length of the film was the only problem with it. I think they could have made it a little bit shorter and it would have worked just as well. Okay, now on to the second film. Airplane 2, the sequel. Came out in 1982. Features features Robert Hayes, Julie Haggerty, and Lloyd Bridges from the first film, but now has Jim Varnon. Jim Vernon as the new Doctor in it, as Leslie Nielsen turned down returning to the movie. Returning for the sequel due to his commitment to Police Squad TV show. And we also have William Shatner in this movie. And they do have references to Star Trek, the original series, in it. Okay, the plot for this one, we are now launching the first rocket to space that's going to take people to the space colony to live. Well, Ted, having still had his issues from the war, the PTSD in other words, and been committed to a mental asylum due to the events of the first one finally getting to him, among other things, as I will leave that to the film to show you, must now get on the space shuttle in order to save the life of his girlfriend and stop the problem with the shuttle that occurs as a result. Sorry, I should have put a spoiler on that. Okay, something I noticed that a lot of others noticed as well. The spaceship's voice styling is done like that from HAL in 2001 A Space Odyssey, only in parody form. But it turns out this was not the only time that they mocked or parodied 2001 Space Odyssey among other sci-fi films. Like I said, they also parodied Star Trek with William Shatner looking through a periscope and seeing the Starship Enterprise. They have music from Battlestar Galactica and among others played. And also, again, going with 2001 Space Odyssey, you have the Blue Danube played during space travel. Now, something I didn't know, over 20 years later, the directing trio that turned down coming up with the sequel still haven't watched the film, according to them in an interview. And at the time they were asked about it, when they were asked, I mean, because initially they didn't have anything to do with the script, they didn't want to have anything to do with the film, so they didn't watch it. Now, for them not to watch it 20 years later, that might actually be a good thing given how off this film actually was compared to theirs. Also, apparently, at a theater in Cincinnati, viewers were given 3D glasses to watch the film with, or to watch the film. After 10 minutes of blurry vision, they realized they'd been tricked and that it wasn't a 3D film, though they never figured out who did it. Um, while Leslie Nielsen did turn down the role due to his commitment to the TV show on which the Naked Gun movies are based, he is shown in flashbacks, and he's replaced by um, Doctor Stone. Sorry, I thought he had a first name and I'd just forgotten it for a second. Who's played by John Vernon, who the most memorable thing I can think of for him is being the dean in Animal House, which starred the late Belushi brother, the late John Belushi. Also, another interesting fact, this one really caught my attention because I didn't remember this about it at the time. The automobile that's used to jumpstart the space shuttle in the movie is the 1959 Ford Edsel. The reason why this is important is because this car is one of the biggest flops in automotive history. So the fact that they used that, to me, could say that one, they were saving money by getting that car. Two, it's a way of making fun of the car by saying that the best it can do is jumpstart the space shuttle. And three, that it isn't even worth being a regular car. It's just there for take up space and be used. as an emergency type situation. Um, Robert Stack returned. I mean, he refused to return, feeling that this movie, much like I did, was too much of a copy of the first film. Now, something I didn't pay attention to, but I did go back after finding this detail and did find it, that the speed gauge on the shuttle is set, I mean, has 55 marked. During the time of this film, due to the energy crisis that was happening, many cars had the speedometer highlighted or marked at 55 to remind drivers of the speed limit. Also, um, around this time, Sammy Hagar came out with a song, Can't Drive 55. It may have been 84 when he actually did that song, but it was somewhere around that area that speaks about how he can't drive 55 and how he get and it goes through like all the events of how he goes from getting in trouble and how he does this, and that, and then ends up in trouble because of it. Anyways, back to the film. Sonny Bono, Cher's former husband, is actually in this movie. You can see him in it buying a time bomb, and when he buys it, the casing for it has stickers on it from Hiroshima and other places that were known for being bombed. I mean, being destroyed by bombs in some way. Um, Also, the music played when Clarence is gassed in the movie is Mission Impossible's theme song, the TV series. Peter Graves was actually Peter Graves, who plays Clarence, starred on Mission Impossible TV show. And back to my references about 2001: A Space Odyssey, the ROK 4000, it's the HAL 9000 from Space Odyssey. And I'm going to cut out this next line that I had because that's a spoiler, and sorry, it gives away too much of the film with that. And my third one, I mean, what would have been my third one, but is now my second one, the Blue Danube, is actually played in both movies while they're traveling in space. Now, for my final notes on Airplane 2, the sequel, one, it's too close to the original. Only thing they did was make it about space travel this time, and instead of food poisoning, you had another type of problem occur that is out of the, I mean, that is just about as bad. Two, when you have actors not wanting to return because it's too close to the original, or they feel that it wouldn't be right, and even the directors didn't want to return because they thought they'd used up everything, that's a sign you should have left it alone and just stopped at the original or at the first one. And number three, there was intended to be a third film, Airplane 3, but because of Airplane 2 doing so mediocre in the theaters, they cut the idea. But some of the films, I mean, some of the videos still feature at the end of the credits a thing telling you to look out for Airplane 3. And as for my overall grade for this one, and I think I'm actually being generous with this, I'm going to give it a C plus, because normally you copy like this movie did, you would have failed in school, and that would have been if you were lucky that you didn't get expelled. But anyways, thank you for watching my review on these two films. Feel free to leave me your review about what you thought of these films in the comments, as well as what you think I should do for the upcoming one. And until next time.